Omega Coding welcomes you to its 6th React lesson. As I said before, that there is nothing difficult in web developing and you can do it all. So, for today's lesson, we are going to study about the lifecycle of the React component, which methods the React component consists of, and in which method we can start an event. So, we should create a simple boilerplate of a create React app, and in order to understand the lifecycle method of the component, then we should create the clock example. Here we remove that code. So we create a new directory which we call it components, and in which we create a new index file, index.js. Also, we create a new directory. We call it digital clock. Now we move the index.js to the digital clock. Okay. So now, here in the digital clock, again, import React from React. Through the import React, we bring the library here, we import it here. Now we write const digital clock again. Using the arrow function, we return the divs. Let's suppose we're writing test, and then we export it again with the default digital clock. Okay, now after that we import the digital clock in the app.js. Import digital clock from components digital clock, and now we insert it here as a class, digital clock. Now let us check here, and here we have our test. Now here, through the props, we transfer the current time. Therefore, we add here the timer props. Between the two curly brackets, we add this state that doesn't exist yet, current time. Okay, and in the same components constructor, we add the initial value. Here we're adding the initial value. This state current time, which will receive new date, the JavaScript function, and let's make it to local string. Now let's write our time prop in the digital clock props, and if we want to copy the time prop here, then as we said, we open the JavaScript brackets like that. We write the props and the name of the props. which is time in our case. It happens that way. Now let's reload our page and see what happens. Okay, now you can see the time here. Now the thing that we want is that we should make the time change every second. Now here, the local string changes the value of the date into a string, which we will be needing it to transfer it and to show it. In other words, we are transferring the string and the current time. Okay, so now let's make here time changes every second, and that's why we need to declare new function. Let's suppose it is a clock launcher, and through the set interval we call the function, which is also an arrow function, and in which we change the value of the state through this set and in the current time we add new date, then we add this code to local string. It appears here. Now you can see it. Now we have to give the set interval time so that it changes the value every second. And that's why we close the curly bracket of the set interval function and we add 1000 milliseconds. Then we close it again. Now we remove the additional parentheses and curly brackets. Okay. And now we need to make the clock launcher works. But the question is, where do we have to write it so that it starts working? It can work in the constructor, and therefore we write here this clock launcher don't forget the semicolons. Okay, now let's see what is happening here. Let's reload the code. And now, as you can see, it is changing. Our counter is working perfectly. That's amazing. Now, why is time clock here important? Because it helps us to see the life cycle of the component in a more figurative way. And the following example is very useful to show every part of the cycle. Okay, now let's go back. And yeah, I want to tell you something, that the life cycle of the component starts right exactly from the constructor. Okay, and now let us insert the console log and the constructor. Console. Constructor. And let us check our page. Now let us inspect. As you can see it here with console. In the console we have the constructor. It is inserted here. After that, the life cycle of the component starts to develop and other time zones start to work. Now let's start with the component wheel mount. Notice that I'm writing it before the render. Component wheel mount. And again we open the brackets. Now through the console log again. Component wheel mount. Now you can see it is here right after the constructor. And if I insert the component wheel mount here using the console log again, console dot log. Here we are rendering components render. Okay, now let us see here. Okay, components render, it is being repeated many times, and that's because through the set interval we have already set the state to be changing every second, and when the state is changing, then the return here and the render are working perfectly. Now let us make an example where we will understand when the will mount will be necessary for us. Okay, here I transfer the age variable, let's suppose it's 18, and in the app.js I receive the props and then here I insert this props age. Okay, and now let us see what happens in our page. Okay, here you can see the 18, which is the age that we inserted there. And now in the state here we write new one, height. Let's make it for the moment undefined. Okay, now let's go to the will mount, and here we write let height, in which I'll attribute if the age is younger than 18, then the height equals teen. Else if age is older than 18, let's write it 70, then the height will be elder. Else the height also will be adult. And now let's set the state. Again, in the will mount it will be this set state height, which is the height variable as well, that I already declared it in the will mount component here, and it is totally different. Until the very moment it was totally different from that, but now you can see it takes it. Now thanks to the ES6, the height here in the state, the variable in the state, matches our new variable here, and therefore we can remove the height, that one, and it will also work. And now in order to see the results, here we write mentioned y, I suppose young, we open this props.age and age, and this person is again from the Y group, which is the young, and we write the value here, the value of the height, this state height. Okay, and now let us see what is happening there. 18 mentioned, Y, 18 age, the age, and this person is young, as we said, which is an adult. Now it is working. Now let us change the age here. Let's say it's 80, and see here. Okay, the age is elder. So, as you can see, the component will mount takes the props and installs the value of the state, and then the return starts to work. In other words, the component will mount works before the return and does all the process before the return. Now let us move to the other LIfeCycle method. Component did mount. Again through the console log. Component Now let us see when it will work. We open our page. Okay, now you see first the constructor worked. After that the component will mount, then you have the components render, and finally we have the component did mount according to the set interval. Now pay attention that the component will mount and the component did mount are not working anymore. It's only the components render that is working. Now let us move to the next LIfeCycle method, which is component will receive a props, and therefore in order to use it here we have to import a new component. Let's suppose the name of the component is input comp from components again input. Okay, and now I create a new directory which I call it input, and in which I create a new JavaScript file and we call it index. And now let us insert the input component in the return. And we transfer the prop, let's suppose test the prop equals 11, and I try to call the function twice. Here it's 12. After that I write in the index what our component is compiled of. Import React. Here we open the curly brackets, writing class-based component. Input comp. And the constructor here, in which we receive the props. And here, again, our super method, in which I insert the props, and I create a new state. Let's suppose this state equals name, which is known for the moment, and then we are writing here the rendered, in which we write the return, and we only here write only one main if input now I create change the event in which we write the variable this set the state name event dot target dot again the value. Okay, and now I can add the component we'll receive method component will receive props in which I add next props, and again through the console log we copy props and I add next props text in order to understand which section of the code is working. After that, we add the component will mount component will mount through which we copy again console.log component will mount to. In order to understand when the component will mount first start to work and when the component will mount second will work in the input. And finally, we export the input comp with the default input comp. Now let us reload our page, and here we can see the results of our work. They are exactly the same way that we have written there, and even our time counter is working perfectly. Now let us see what is happening in the console. Okay, so because of the set interval in the app.js, the render is working for many times. And when the following code is working, then the input component is called, which every time receives a new test prop. Now let us reload our page, and here you can see that the component will mount to only works when the component is called for the first time, while the component will receive a props works every time that the component is called, and it copies all the received props through the console log. So the component will receive a props won't work from the first time. Rather, when you call it for the second or third time, then both the render and the component will receive a props will start working with a new props. And here the component did mount and the component will mount won't work even when they are called for the second, third, or fourth time. That was for today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. See you next time.